For more on the life and legacy of this great sportsman, we're joined by ABC's friend and USA Today sports columnist Christine Brennan. Christine, good to see you. You know, I was just thinking, I was a kid, an American kid growing up in the 60s and 70s, didn't know anything about soccer. And then, you know, Pelé came to New York, and it was really a change for so many of us. Well, what's your reaction to the death of this legend?
Terry, I feel exactly the same way as you did. And I think there are millions and millions of Americans. I would say anyone who is 45 or older who might have heard the name Pelé before they heard the word soccer. I know that sounds dramatic, but for you and me and millions of us growing up, soccer wasn't played by boys and girls at age 4 or 5 the way it is now. It was baseball or softball or just playing around in neighborhoods, bicycles, shooting baskets, whatever. The organized sports craze had not yet hit America. And along came Pelé playing for the New York Cosmos, as Maggie said in her piece, in 1975. And that's the first I ever heard of soccer. And I was a huge sports fan growing up. So 1975, Pelé comes to New York. He's playing for the New York Cosmos. And all of a sudden, Americans realize there is soccer for the vast 99% of Americans. And this is the biggest name in the sport. And to this day, I think many of us feel that way about him. So as children, we learned his name, and he took us by the hand and brought us into soccer, the success of the U.S. men's and U.S. women's, especially U.S. women's national team that we've seen over the last few decades, Terry. I think we can chart that course from when America met Pelé.
And Christine, that does capture this moment in American history, and he is soccer history, of course. You know, in American history, he came to New York. Joe Namath was winning the Super Bowl. The amazing Mets had just won the World Series. It was glamorous. It was right the center of the sports universe in the United States. And as a Chicagoan, I say that with regret. But you couldn't resist Pelé. And he had already had, however, this amazing career for Brazil in the World Cup and elsewhere.
That's true. And as a Toledo and a Detroit fan, as well as a Chicago fan, I agree with you on all of that. Yes. I mean, what we didn't know, we knew he was famous, but we didn't necessarily know why. And again, with him bringing us into the game of soccer, when I say us, I mean millions and millions and millions of Americans who then had their children and maybe even their grandchildren now playing the sport and loving the sport. But he then introduced us to what we'd all been missing. And again, there were people who followed the Men's World Cup, of course, but in general, it was a tiny little niche. And all of a sudden, we start hearing about Brazilian soccer. And of course, we see these beautiful highlights here, the bicycle kick, just the magic of this man and what he could do on a soccer field, winning 3 World Cups. Brazil, we knew Rio, we knew it was soccer crazy, and we started to realize why, and it was Pelé. And even going to the Olympics in 2016, I covered those, Terry, and the World Cup in 2014 had been in Brazil. And there was real question about whether the World Cup in 2014 would be a bigger deal than the Olympics in 2016. And you really don't have that conversation. The Olympics always seems to be kind of the biggest thing with the multi-sports anyway, as opposed to the one sport. And yet Brazil had kind of its head turned. You know, it had the World Cup and then it had the Olympics. And so I think we all started to realize a nation, an entire sports nation, the United States of America, plus many other places in the world that hadn't paid that much attention to soccer, I think really started to realize how big a deal Pelé was. That is why his death is so significant and why so many are mourning around the world today because of the greatness of this man.
Absolutely. The English like to say they invented soccer. They want to bring it home, the World Cup, but really Brazil certainly perfected the beautiful game, as they call it. And Christine, since we were kids, you've had this great career as a sports writer. And I want to ask about Pelé's legacy outside the game. You know, after he left, he was just this still global icon.
Oh, that's right, Terry. And, the story that Maggie had about Nigeria, where they literally stopped a civil war because they wanted to focus on soccer and on him. He had that power. He worked for the United Nations. He was a global ambassador. It was actually Henry Kissinger who engineered or helped engineer his arrival in New York with the Cosmos, as we were discussing back in 1975. He was much more than an athlete. He was much more than a soccer player. He was that global icon, and he used it for good. Here you see him. He's playing, he's bringing soccer to everyone. He's playing with kids. He is teaching the world about the beautiful game. And it's not just boys, but it's girls, which we've seen that great revolution in the United States and elsewhere with women's soccer. And that's who Pelé was. So after he was finished with his magic on the field, he turned to the magic off the field and again used his name and his game for good. He did that obviously for decades, and as recently as a few weeks ago during the Men's World Cup, he was putting out a message, saying, sending his best wishes, saying that he was still fighting colon cancer, and he was still one of the biggest names in sports at this time as well as in history. When Pelé spoke, the world listened, even during this recent Men's World Cup.
And all these decades after he was such a star, he did maintain, I guess, sort of like Michael Jordan, right? Once you're that great, once you're the GOAT, and you've done so much for the sport and had that kind of, you can see it in these highlights, this personality that he had, the way that people were drawn to him. You never quite lose it. And I can't imagine, I've actually never been to Brazil, what stature he has there and how his country will mourn him and remember him.
Oh, for sure, Terry. Yes, Brazil was just that soccer is their sport. I think Jordan is an apt description with the smile of Magic Johnson, maybe a little bit of Serena, that incredible energy and personality just to bring you along and introduce you to a sport, introduce you to the game that he loves so much, soccer, football, of course, as it's called many places around the world. Absolutely. It was more, the talent on the field alone was remarkable and worthy of all of our conversation and attention today, as it's been for decades. But the personality, it was the perfect meshing of the athletic ability with the personality to literally bring soccer to the world, to be a hero, to the point where today, all these years later, 1975 is a long, long time ago, almost 50 years ago, and we're still calling him Pelé, and we're still talking about him. That one name, that's all we needed. So it was much more than soccer, which was fantastic, but it was that personality. And the highlights, we could watch them all day, couldn't we? It's magical all over again, and what fun to see him, even as we're so sad that he is gone.
Absolutely. What a legacy he leaves. Christine Brennan, thanks for being with us on such short notice. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry.
82 years old.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.